In the headlines, the country's chief elections officer, Keith Lowenfield, is slapped with 3 criminal charges relating to the March 2nd elections and says he's disappointed.
I think he is disappointed that he is brought before the court for something he has not done.
The chair of GCOM, Justice Retired Claudette Singh, says the appeal case against the recount is an abuse of the court and should be dismissed. No arrest made in gunning down of Le Penitent's youth, and the family wants a thorough investigation. 2 elderly men in Region 9 who had COVID-19 symptoms die hours apart. And in sport, Akim Green and Avinash Ramzan discuss England's recovery against West Indies on day 1 of the 3rd and final test at Old Trafford. With the news, I'm Kurt Campbell. We're glad you could join us. First up, the country's chief elections officer, Keith Lowenfield, appeared at the Georgetown Magistrates Court on Friday, slapped with 3 criminal charges relating to the March 2nd general and regional elections. His lead attorney, senior counsel Neil Boston, told reporters that Lowenfield is disappointed in the charges. Bibi Katoon tells us more.
Chief Elections Officer Keith Lowenfield was granted $450,000 bail on 3 criminal charges related to fraud, misconduct in office, and breach of the public's trust by providing results of the March 2nd elections, which he knows to be false. He made his first appearance on Friday at the Georgetown Magistrates Court with his lawyers Nigel Hughes and senior counsel Neil Boston. He appeared before Magistrate Faith Magosti and was not required to plead to the indictable charges. As such, he was granted $150,000 bail on each of the charge. Shortly after the case, senior counsel Boston said his client maintains his innocence but is disappointed in the charges.
I think he is disappointed that he is brought before the court for something he has not done.
Lowenfield has been evading the authorities since the charges were filed privately on June 30th. He was initially slated to appear in court on July 3rd, but did not show up. The court was only able to serve the documents on him on Thursday. Lowenfield's lawyers said the charges are politically motivated.
It must be a political thing. If the charges to me have nuisance value, nothing else, there is no substance in the charge, then it can only have nuisance. It can't be nothing else. And Mr. Adamant, in his application for bail, made a political speech rather than addressing the legal issues.
Our real concern is that they're attempting to take a court of law and make it into a political circus. We will continue to abide by the precincts of the law. We will come back here in the middle of August, in which case we continue our defense of Mr. Lowenfield.
The charges were filed privately on June 30th by People's Progressive Party member Desmond Morayan and member of the New Movement, Daniel Josh Kanai, who are represented by attorney Glenn Hanneman. The trio on Friday morning exited the court under heavy heckling from APNU-AFC supporters who were gathered outside the court. Hanneman, in a subsequent interview with the Newsroom over the telephone, said he is not affiliated with any political party and took up the case because he feels Lowenfield should be held accountable for his actions.
A lot of them were claiming that this was political grandstanding, and I want to make it very clear that I have absolutely no political affiliation. I'm a lawyer, and that I would not have prosecuted this, agreed to prosecute this case unless I felt that there was cogent, compelling evidence to substantiate the charge. Obviously, the charge has political ramifications, but as a lawyer, that doesn't concern me. What concerns me is evidence.
Lowenfield came under scrutiny for preparing his elections report on March 5th, which shows a victory for the incumbent APNU-AFC coalition based on the fraudulent and inflated figures provided by Claremont Mingo, the returning officer for Guyana's largest voting district, Region 4. As a result of Mingo's fraud, GCOM embarked on a national vote recount, which showed the opposition People's Progressive Party won the elections by 15,416 votes. Lowenfield, however, has still tried on 2 other occasions to make the APNU-AFC the election's winner. In one case, he dumped 115,000 votes, and in the last instance, prepared a report with Mingo's fraudulent figures and not the recount figures requested by the GCOM chair. He is expected to appear in court again on August 14th. Bibi Katoon reporting for the Newsroom.
When the news returns, the chair of GCOM, Justice retired Claudette Singh, says the appeal case against the recount is an abuse of the court and should be dismissed. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the Newsroom. We tell you now that Justice retired Claudette Singh, the chairwoman of the Guyana Elections Commission, GCOM, is arguing for the appeal filed against Monday's ruling of the Chief Justice Roxanne George to be dismissed. Fariza Hanif has the details.
The Chief Justice, Roxanne George, had validated the recount of ballots cast on March 2nd and invalidated all other elections report made before the recount started. As such, Chairman of GCOM, Justice retired Claudette Singh, is arguing for the Court of Appeal to dismiss the case. The appeal filed herein is frivolous, vexatious, and amongst an abuse of the court's process, Justice Singh's attorney, Kim Kite Thomas, submitted in her written response to the Court of Appeal. Kite Thomas will present oral arguments when the case comes up on Saturday at 10 hours. In her written submission, she argues that the appeal lacks merit and ought to be dismissed since the findings and decision of the Chief Justice represent the long-established jurisprudence of electoral laws and the electoral regime in respect to the issues raised before the court. She reasoned that the issues were heard and determined before, and in keeping with the res judicata principle, the application should not be entertained by the Court of Appeal. Kite Thomas argued that the recent decisions of the Court of Appeal and the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, dealt with the same issues being raised again, and so the appeal seeks to relitigate issues already determined. The applicant, Msinga Jones, an agent of the APNU-AFC, is again challenging the constitutionality of the order, which provided for a recount of all votes cast on March 2nd and whether the declarations made before the recount should stand. The reason for the argument that the old declarations should be used is that the country's electoral laws provide for returning officers to declare the results in their respective districts, and those results are then tabulated by the Chief Elections Officer to provide a report to GCOM for a declaration of the winner to be made. Kite Thomas contended that Order 60 is lawful, and she argued that the Court of Appeal has already ruled that questions regarding the elections process must be argued during an elections petition after the results of the elections are declared. Any challenge to the validity of an election and any dispute or claim of any irregularities or illegalities in relation to an election can only lawfully form the basis of an election petition after the result has been declared, Kite Thomas stated. She also pointed out the pronouncement of the CCJ that unless and until an election court decides otherwise, the votes already counted by the recount process as valid votes are incapable of being declared invalid by any person or authority. The Chief Justice in her ruling Monday made it lucidly clear. Kite Thomas argues that far from nullifying Order 60 and the recount process, in my view, the CCJ explicitly endorsed it. Further, at paragraph 60, the Chief Justice had stated that both courts had pronounced on the issue, and as such, she could not rule that Order 60 was invalidated. It is respectfully submitted that the Court of Appeal and the Caribbean Court of Justice have already determined the validity of the recount process and the recount order and found that the process was transparent and in keeping with the constitutional powers of GCOM as well as the legislative framework of our electoral system, Kite Thomas stated. She noted that in the recount process, the district coordinators for each district signed off the certificates of tabulation, which were also signed by the stakeholders. The district coordinators were equivalent to the returning officers provided for under the electoral laws. Regarding the role of the Chief Elections Officer, she argued that nothing that the officer does in relation to the elections is exempt from the direction, instruction, or supervision of the Commission. He cannot act arbitrarily or as a lone ranger, in the words of the Honorable Chief Justice, but is subject to the Commission, the Constitution, and the laws of Guyana, Kite Thomas noted. Reporting for the Newsroom, Fariza Hanif.
The Private Sector Commission, PSC, says it has taken note of the increasingly ugly abuse and threats appearing on Facebook directed at the chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission, Justice retired Claudette Singh, as the time fast approaches for GCOM to meet and finally declare the results of the general and regional elections held on March 2nd, 2020. The PSC in a statement said these Scurrilous and extremely threatening Facebook posts have followed the written directions issued by the chairman of GCOM to the chief elections officer to submit his report from the results of the recount. As such, the PSC said it is clear that the threats are deliberate and criminal attempt to influence the decision of GCOM with regard to the declaration of the results of the elections. The PSC called on the Commissioner of Police, Leslie James, to investigate, pursue, and bring an immediate stop to the exploitation of Facebook to carry out the criminal endeavor, clearly amounting to the worst form of cybercrime. The new and united Guyana, Anak, which has managed to secure a seat in the National Assembly with the help of two other parties, on Friday dismissed calls from the incumbent APNU-AFC for dialogue. Bibi Katoon reports.
The APNU-AFC coalition, in a statement on July 22nd, said it remains open to dialogue with other political parties and stakeholders on the way forward for Guyana. The coalition said it will do this in the national interest and with the view to maintaining stability and peace. But 2 days later, a new and united Guyana, Anak, has made it clear that it is not interested in dialogue with the caretaker government. A statement from Anak on Friday noted, and I quote, "If the coalition is indeed prepared to act responsibly, the first act will be to concede they have lost the 2020 general and regional elections." End of quote. Anak said the resolution of the elections impasse rests with the coalition, conceding defeat and allowing a new government to be sworn in. Quote, "It should be noted that the ongoing political situation they claim to want resolved is in totality again their own doing and making. It is nothing short of dishonesty and another display of duplicitous nature of the leadership of the APNU-AFC to say they are prepared to act to resolve a situation which they have created and is within their power to resolve." End of quote, Anak said in its statement. Anak said the coalition continues to act in bad faith and against the best interests of the nation. It further stated that any dialogue will be done with a legally elected government, parliamentary opposition, other political parties and stakeholders on the way forward. The party reiterated its call for the national elections results to be declared using the final tabulation from the national recount. That recount showed the opposition People's Progressive Party won the elections by over 15,000 votes. Similar calls were made by the international community and ruled upon by the High Court and the Caribbean Court of Justice. Those results are currently being challenged by the APNU-AFC in court as they seek to have them discarded and stay in office for another term. Anak, which joined its list with the Liberty and Justice Party and the New Movement, won over 2,000 votes at the March 2nd elections, enough to gain one seat in the 65-member National Assembly. Bibi Katoon reporting for the Newsroom.
No arrests made in gunning down of La Penitence youth and two elderly men in Region 9 who had COVID-19 symptoms die hours apart. Those and more stories when the Newsroom returns. We tell you now that police are still investigating the brazen daylight gunning down of a 23-year-old man on Thursday not far from his home on Middle Road, La Penitence, Georgetown. Navindra Samaru was on his way to work when he was shot in his car by gunmen on a motorcycle. Isanella Paho reports.
Investigators have not been able to make any arrest into the murder of 23-year-old Navindra Samaru, who was shot while driving his car to work in broad daylight on Thursday on Middle Street, La Penitence, Georgetown. Residents in the area also remain tight-lipped on what really transpired. The Newsroom understands that Samaru was shot once to the right arm. He had just left his house after collecting his lunch. Samaru was employed as a marketing agent for G&J Phone Cards Investment. According to the father, Sorish Samaru, his son had earlier delivered letters to a Citibank and conducted some business at the Ghana Revenue Authority.
And from there, he came home to collect his lunch and was heading back to work. And after that, while heading back to work, that's when he reached his demise.
Regional Commander Senior Superintendent Philip Azor told the Newsroom that two men with face masks rode up behind Samaru while he was driving and shot him. They grabbed the bag from inside of the car and rode away. The men were on an XR black and red motorcycle. The father said he was at work when he heard about the incident and left immediately for the hospital. Samaru was rushed to the Georgetown Public Hospital by a resident.
Yes, I was at work and I got a phone call from my niece and that my son was shot. So I leave for office and I went straight into the hospital. By the time I reached Jerry, he was already died.
A postmortem done on Friday revealed that he died as a result of the gunshot wound.
He's not a person that will get involved himself in any. He's just very nice to everybody. If you hold him out, we'll talk about him. I think that the police do a thorough investigation with the footage that they get and give me my justice. Because now it wouldn't be any nice.
Reporting for the newsroom, I am Isinella Patwa.
The South Rupununi District Council has lambasted the Regional Executive Officer, Carl Parker, for recommending charges against village Tushaus who are accused of hiding persons that illegally enter from Brazil. A statement from the council on Thursday noted that the Tushaus were also told that if there is an increase in COVID-19 cases in their villages, they can expect little help from the regional authorities. Parker on Thursday told the newsroom that some villages in Region 9 are hiding persons who cross over from Brazil illegally. Since the borders were shut in mid-March to prevent the spread of COVID-19, the region has been challenged with illegal border crossing. The council also noted that recommendations were made to the Region 9 COVID-19 Task Force for a more effective COVID-19 response, but to date nothing much has been done. It was noted that village Tushaus are now overwhelmed in keeping their communities safe with little support from the task force. The COVID-19 situation in Region 9 is even more worrying for the South Rupununi District Council after 2 elderly men from the Putanaru village died late Wednesday night and early Thursday after coming into contact with patients who were tested positive for COVID-19. Isinella Patwa has the details.
3 villages in the South Rupununi, Putaranau, Santa Creek and Chulinab have all confirmed cases of COVID-19. The men from Putaranau village, ages 68 and 80, died hours apart. The newsroom was reliably informed that one of the men had direct contact with the positive COVID-19 patient, while the other had a relative who also tested positive. The newsroom was further informed that both men had underlying medical conditions and displayed the COVID-19 symptoms, but died before health authorities arrived in the village to test them. When contacted, Program Coordinator for the South Rupununi District Council, Kid James, told the newsroom that the village was currently making preparations to bury the men Friday, and as such, they will not be tested for COVID-19.
They were not tested. Again, you see, because of the limited number of tests here, it has those who were given priority for testing last week were those within the immediate families of those who were tested positive.
James further stated that widespread testing is desperately needed in the region, or at least in the affected villages. However, Putaranau is of major concern at this time. This particular village is closest to the Brazilian border, and due to heavy rains and flooding, it is becoming difficult for officials to access the village. Since the COVID-19 outbreak in the 3 villages, the council has been closely monitoring the villages and providing assistance with donations from the Amerindian People's Association and public citizens.
We have been assisting in terms of getting foodstuff to those villages, places like Chulinab, and they have done it on their own in terms of assisting their satellite village, which is CARICOM. Right? At the moment, the area of concern is the Putaranau and the Kator villages.
Meanwhile, it was also revealed that CSEC students and teachers in Sand Creek have been placed under quarantine. It is unclear how many teachers and students are under quarantine or if they were tested, but medical teams were dispatched to a few villages to conduct testing recently.
What we are now experiencing is that this may very well be here for some time to come, and we need to start planning both at our village councils and at the SRTC level means and ways of how we can actually deal with this and make sure that that communities can continue to live, continue to be healthy, continue to be safe.
Of the so far 18 confirmed COVID-19 cases in the region, half are imported cases from Brazil, one of the countries with the most cases in the world. Reporting for the newsroom, I am Isinella Patwa.
We now bring you an update from the Ministry of Public Health on Guyana's COVID-19 situation.
Now, for the update in Guyana, the total number of tests done is 5,439. The number of persons tested is 4,057. and 3,705 persons are negative. As of the 24th of July 2020, the number of positives is now 352, with 20 COVID-related deaths. The number of active cases in institutional isolation is 154. 33 persons are in institutional quarantine, and 4 persons are in the COVID ICU. To date, 178 persons have recovered. Yesterday, I shared with you some guidelines from our workplaces outlined in the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1997, Chapter 9906. I mentioned the guidelines for travel, entrance, and office layout, and today I will talk about ventilation and sanitation nodes and some of the guidelines that schools should begin to consider. So as far as ventilation is concerned, employers should increase exhaust rates from AC, increase airflow from outside if possible, reduce or eliminate the recycling of air, service filters more frequently, reconsider policies regarding daily shutting down of AC where they are the only source of ventilation. Regarding sanitation nodes, provide tissues to dry hands, provide soap, water, sanitizer, that should be liquid soap, water, sanitizers in generous quantities. Ensure nodes have posters with hand washing techniques. Educate on hygiene measures for coughing or sneezing. As far as surfaces are concerned, prioritize the hourly cleaning of rails and doorknobs. Clean handsets of multi-user telephones. Adopt single-user keyboard policies. Cleaners must be provided with gloves, in addition to disinfectants. Enhanced cleaning must be done in spaces where ill persons would have been working. Travel. No non-essential travel. No travel even with minor symptoms. If sick during travel duty, seek nearest medical attention and inform supervisor. Regarding meetings, if needed, seek open spaces or room with outside ventilation and socially distanced. Video conferencing should be new preferred modus. Schools. General guidelines. The Ministry of Education will take the lead on decisions regarding students' return to school and how they will operationalize the workplace guidelines. However, these are just some suggestions for consideration. Entrances, note well. All personnel entering school premises must wear masks. All entrances and strategic places around the premises should have hygiene blocks comprising sinks with running water, liquid soap, or hand sanitizing stations. Screening must be done at entrances. Temperatures should be taken with the laser thermometer. Regarding classroom layout, social distancing, and other pertinent guidelines, it is suggested that the Ministry of Education, via heads of schools, identify focal points and establish joint committees in collaboration with parents to consider the best way forward to create the safest environment for our students. Parents and teachers should take joint responsibility for the policing of students during school hours to ensure adherence to guidelines.
When the newsroom returns, the financial, weather, and bridge reports along with sports.